Hey, what's going on? Aaron Murray here with the Players Lounge, and we are post-spring game festivities. It was a great weekend across the SEC, but I want to focus on the Georgia spring game here. We had Matt Stinchcomb last week on the call for the spring game, giving us a little bit of a preview. We have his better half right now, Taylor Zarzour, who I got to work with a couple times last year. One of the best in the game for the SEC Network, joining us right now to give us his thoughts and opinions post-game, kind of what they talked about in the coaches' meetings, what he saw on the football field. But first off, Taylor, thanks for spending some time with us today.
Good to see you, my man. I missed you. I miss somebody that's watching 17 football games at once, as you did when we watched Liberty shock Arkansas last year. You are as dialed into everything happening in college football as anyone I've ever worked with. So I hope we certainly get that chance again.
I got a great Taylor story. This is before, I think this is before you and I worked the game. So I've covered one Georgia game in my life. This was 2 years ago. I had the Georgia Auburn game, which was great. So then this year, my first year at the ESPN, I got put on a Georgia game. I'm like, hey, yeah, I got a Georgia game. Let's go. They trust me to call a Georgia game without, saying go dogs on the broadcast. Then 3 days before the game, I get an email from our boss saying, oh, we're moving you to the Mississippi State game, not the game in Athens. And I look, and it was Stinchcomb and you, Taylor, that got moved to the game in Athens. So in my head, I'm like, okay, Stinch just played seniority on my ass. He made a call, said he wanted to go to Athens, easier trip, cover the Bulldogs, yada, yada, yada. Don't got to go to start Vegas. And so I'm like giving him crap. Come to find out, it was you who took the Georgia game away from me, not Stinchcomb. So if you want to make an apology, yeah, I'm still ready whenever you are.
I don't. Well, look, the President's Cup was going on in Charlotte. I had to do some work for that, and it was a quick trip to Athens. I didn't know that you were getting screwed as this was happening, so it wasn't. I promise you, it wasn't directed towards you, but it was kind of funny. Not so funny to you. It was funny to Stinch, at least, that this happened. I do think you might owe me some money. I can't remember exactly what the bet was, but you were ridiculing me on a car ride from Fayetteville to Springdale, Arkansas, about the sheer mention that Bryce Young might be the first pick in the draft. I don't know if you remember that car ride, but I think I said on the air the other day that I think Aaron Murray owes me something. I would like to think it's like maybe a bottle of bourbon, but anyway, if that comes to fruition in 10 days, then I think we need to share a libation too.
For adding another, because I drove to start Vegas, so you added another 10 hours of being in the car for me compared to going to Athens. So if anything, a nice round of golf, I'll take it. Maybe a lesson before my golf season begins in about 2 weeks would be nice. So all right, break it down. I know it's spring game, so it's not really a real game, but what is, for those listening that don't really know the day-to-day, because I really haven't gone over it myself on the show, what is your day-to-day in Athens? When do you get in? Do you get on Thursday? Do you get on Friday? When are the coaches' meetings? How are they like? Where do you go to dinner? Yeah. Give us the full breakdown of Athens, Georgia from this past weekend.
Well, I do a lot of prep at home. Fortunately, I did 3 Dogs games last year. I'm very familiar with their program. Obviously, they've retained almost all of their coaches. Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator, is gone, and they replaced him with Mike Bobo, who's forgotten more about Georgia football, especially Aaron Murray, than anybody. So there weren't a whole lot of fresh faces to get to know Aaron, as there are in many spring games where you have a new coach, or you have new coordinators, or you have a bunch of new players, and the roster has just lost all these guys. That's not necessarily the case with Georgia. I realize Stetson Bennett, Jalen Carter, A.D. Mitchell has just transferred. I realize they have had a few guys that were no longer with the program, but overall, I'm really trying to learn about the roster. What are the position groups that we're really going to focus on during the week? Typically, I would get in on Thursday night. For this one, I got in Friday morning. We have coaches meetings and players meetings that last for a couple of hours. We had a couple of great meetings with players and coaches. Glenn Schumann, who is now the defensive coordinator. I can't remember the name of, you probably know it. There's a title to the defensive coordinator, someone else's name that's put on the defensive coordinator's name when you're the defensive coordinator at Georgia. You're honoring it, and it's not the guy that used to headbutt people with his helmet off. I have to think of who this is. But anyway, Schumann is the defensive coordinator. Will Muschamp is the co-defensive coordinator. So Schumann, we met with him. We met with Mike Bobo. Gotten to know him quite well through the years and all the different places he's been. Good to have him back in Athens. We obviously met with Coach Smart for quite some time, and we met with a couple of players as well. And I take a lot out of those meetings. I think the biggest thing that I took out of those meetings on Friday was that while there's a tremendous amount of talk about maybe playing an FCS opponent in the spring, raising money for smaller programs in college football, you heard Hugh Freeze at Auburn say that it'd be fun to play like a Troy or a Samford or another Alabama school to raise more money in the state of Alabama. Alyssa Lang asked Kirby about that, and Kirby said, hey, if that's what we want to do, that's fine. He said, I like when Georgia plays Georgia because it's the best opponent we are going to face. He believes he has the best program in college football. You're not going to get any argument from me or from most people, given they just won the last 2 national championships. So he feels like he gets to evaluate his players better when they're competing against each other. You know, the practices on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are so good in Athens currently. Putting them in a game-like situation on Saturday is something he was excited to see. So I think he was able to evaluate the quarterbacks well. And that is something that stuck in my head as we prepared for the game, is that, you know, with all due respect to UT Martin or Ball State at the beginning of the year, Georgia playing Georgia is probably going to tell everyone a little bit more about what their players look like and how you can evaluate them. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that before the game arrived at 4:00 on Saturday.
God, that is a powerful statement. I mean, they always say like Monday through Friday is usually harder than what they face on Saturday, and that's the truth. I mean, this team is, you said there's not a lot of roster change. They're balanced on offense. I think they're going to be one of the best offenses in the country. I think they're going to be, once again, one of the best defenses in the country. I mean, it was as good as you can get on that football field on Saturday. Obviously, the big news was the quarterback spot. I'm anticipating it being Carson. I was anticipating it being Carson before the game. Not saying anything against the other two. You know, if you put Brock in there or Gunner in there, the team's probably going to go undefeated. That's just Georgia, and that's the schedule this year. I don't think they're going to see all of a sudden, you know, one quarterback makes them undefeated, another quarterback makes them 9-3. They're 12-0 regardless. It's just Carson is unbelievable. He is, with the weapons they brought in, look the part, look comfortable in the system. Did you get any sense in the meetings or in watching kind of your thoughts on how this whole thing is going to shape out?
Kirby was adamant that he hasn't decided who the quarterback is going to be. He's not going to decide who the quarterback is going to be. I asked him if there was a time he would like to have a starting quarterback by, and he said, whenever it's decided, if it goes into the season, so be it. Now, Matt Stinchcomb mentioned that last year it felt like Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss was trying to keep both of those quarterbacks that he was evaluating on campus. You know, he didn't, in this day and age, Aaron, you have to worry about a player transferring all the way into the season. And obviously we'll get to Bear Alexander in a second, but that is a big factor now is players going into the portal and when they decide to transfer. I don't think that's what Kirby's doing here with the quarterback spot. I think he genuinely wants to see all three of these guys and how they perform over the course of the next 5 or 6 months, whether it's from a leadership standpoint, it's from a workout standpoint, or it's actually in practice, whether it was in April or you'll see it in August. Having said all of that, I'd be shocked if Carson Beck isn't the starting quarterback when games matter in the 2023 season because of what you just said. And I certainly would, and everyone watching this should take your opinion before mine, given your success playing for that program and playing for this coordinator. But having said that, just watching the game, the poise that he carries himself with, it was clear in that game that Kirby Smart wanted each of the quarterbacks to face some pressure. He wanted guys in the quarterbacks' faces. He wanted to make them uncomfortable. I didn't really feel like Carson Beck was ever uncomfortable. No, and Brock Vandegrift and Gunnar Stockton, I felt like at times were. And I think that that's what they wanted to see. I don't know how anybody could walk away from that spring game on Saturday and say that Carson Beck wasn't by far the most impressive quarterback that was in Sanford Stadium on Saturday. I agree with you. I think that if he was the quarterback last year, they would have had a genuine chance to win the national championship. And I think with him this year, they have another horrific chance to be in the college football playoff.
Yeah, and listen, experience is everything. I mean, that's the one thing, that he's been there. He's the elder guy in the room. He's played this offense. He looked good last year when he came in too, and you could see that confidence that, like, I know I'm the guy, and he played like that on Saturday during the G-Day game. So I'm excited for him. I just love the story. I mean, we love the Stetson Bennett story, the walk-on turn superstar. What about the kid that waited his turn? Like, how rare that is nowadays. So I love that story just as much, of someone who is willing to stick it out, loves Georgia, loves the situation, and knows that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and decide not to go use his free transfer. Hey, I believe in Georgia. Georgia believes in me. I just got to wait my turn. And now I'm going to be hopefully a superstar this season, leading Georgia to another national championship. Offense didn't look much different, though, Taylor. It looked, I played in, but you talk about me playing for Bobo. Bobo was a lot of 21 personnel, a lot of play action, a lot of under center. It wasn't all the 12 personnel, the shifts, the motion, and Bobo's evolved. Let me tell you this. Sure. Bobo, if you go back and watch him at Colorado State and at Auburn and at South Carolina, wasn't the same offense that we ran back in 2010 to 2013. He's evolved with the times, but this looked very much like Todd Monken's offense. Give us your thoughts on that and kind of what you got from him during those meetings about what this is going to look like this year.
Ironically, Will Muschamp seems to prefer 21 personnel too. So, and he's now a part of the staff on defense. I don't know if we're going to see the number 2 in any sort of personnel set in any college offense these days outside of the academies. But yeah, you're exactly right. It did look a lot like Todd Monken's offense. I would say the one thing, if we're talking personnel, one back, 1 or 2 tight ends. A lot of times last year, Aaron, we saw Georgia in 12 personnel, and that's because Big O, Darnell Washington, was unbelievable as a blocking tight end. And to put this behemoth on the field, Brock Bowers being the other tight end that's such a great pass catcher, a great route runner, a great slot receiver, and then Washington is primarily a blocking tight end. You saw Georgia in 12 personnel a lot. I don't know that you'll see them as much in that because they don't necessarily have that guy. Oscar Delp could turn into that for Georgia, but I think that you're going to see them in 11 personnel, as you were saying, quite a bit this year with just 1 tight end and 1 running back on the field. And yes, Mike Bobo made it clear that offense is working. That offense is working in large part because the offensive line is quite possibly the best in all of college football. There are some, I don't know if concerns, maybe just some questions about left tackle going into the year, but the other positions are so solid. They have so much depth on the offensive line. I think the quarterback is going to have time to make decisions, assuming that is Carson Beck. And you've got guys in the backfield that are very good at catching football. So given how well that worked for Georgia last year, I would expect Mike Bobo's offense to be very similar, with the one exception being they don't have Darnell Washington. They can't really have another tight end on the field that's going to block the way he did. No one was able to take up as much space as he did. So maybe you could see a situation where a couple of tight ends are on the field. And don't be surprised if there's a true freshman that makes an instant impact. If it isn't Lawson Lucky, who's he has a lot of Bowers in him. He's not Brock Bowers, but he has a lot of that immediate ability to catch balls out of the slot, out of the tight end position. Watch out for number 7 for Georgia as a true freshman.
Yeah, I keep hearing a lot about him. I mean, I love 12 personnel. I think Bobo, has learned to love it too, kind of watching what Monken has done. But it's kind of hard because you look at the receivers though too, and McConkey and the guys that got in the transfer portal, and Arian Smith played well, and his speed. Yep. And Bobo's always done a great job of getting those receivers, big explosive plays down the field. I mean, that's gonna be the hard part against covering Georgia. Like, how do you match up with them in their personnel? And Bobo's gonna have a great time, which he did in the spring game, of really mixing it up. I want to get one on the defense real quick, Taylor, and the youth and the speed. Anyone really flashed to you? I know those young linebackers like CJ really showed out to me. Like, man, like this is maybe a young in certain position, but a very fast defense on that side.
Well, I mean, the first thing is that was the elephant in the room on Saturday, is that Bear Alexander is gone into the transfer portal. And it's just such a weird time in college football right now, Aaron, that the day of the spring game, you can have a guy that had a sack in the national championship game decide to transfer out of the program. And I think he's a guy that if he didn't start, would have played a lot for Georgia going into this season. So a little surprising to see that, I guess.
Did they give any indication on Friday? Like, did you know when you're going over
None.
depth charts?
Nope. None. I think that they saw it as a surprise just as much as we did. I think that Zion Logue is clearly the leader of that defensive line. I think that he can be an NFL player in the next year or two. But from a leadership standpoint, it's obvious he owns that room. So that's one guy that I would watch for. You just mentioned the guy that I think really flashed to me on Saturday, and C.J. Allen. I thought that he was terrific in the spring game, and he's somebody, I don't want to make it's hard because when somebody just leaves the program, you immediately think, okay, well, who's going to be Nolan Smith? I'm not saying he's Nolan Smith from a leadership standpoint, but he was very active with his teammates on Saturday, and I was impressed by him. There's a true freshman named Jonell Ogaro, who is from Massachusetts, number 8 for Georgia, that was all over the football field in the second half of the game. He flashed to me. He's somebody that you could see make an impact. And I'm wondering about Malachi Starks because he got off to such a hot start last year, and then he sort of cooled off. I'm wondering, what sort of sophomore season Malachi is going to have. We know how much talent that he has. So those are some of the guys that I would really be looking at in 2023 for the Dogs. But I think that it's clear Zion Logue is the leader of that defense. I was incredibly impressed with him on Friday in the meetings that we had. And it's obvious that he is completely bought into the Georgia culture. People wonder in this day and age if kids are really doing that. The reason Georgia's won the last 2 national championships is because they have the kind of leadership on their team, including Zion Logue. I think they'll benefit from him this year, especially in that locker room and playing most of the game.
All right. So Taylor, once again, was on the call for the Georgia spring game this past weekend. Last one before I let you go, because like I said, this is at the beginning, this is as balanced as a team you're going to find in the country. There's teams that have good offenses, good defenses. I don't think you're going to find a team that is going to be potentially a top 10, both on offense and on defense. That's what we're kind of seeing right now. You've seen a lot of rosters. Obviously, you covered the SEC week in and week out. Seeing Georgia right now, and you alluded to the beginning with all the guys returning from last season, just how good can this team be compared to the past couple of years?
Well, I think when you answer that question, you have to always consider what their schedule looks like. And this is no shot at Georgia because Oklahoma was on their 2023 schedule for years. And then when Oklahoma decided to join the Southeastern Conference next year in 2024, it was agreed that they would not play this game in 2023. And because of that, Georgia's schedule is as easy as I've ever seen for a top 10 program. I just don't know where the landmines are. I mean, if you look at this thing, you would say, okay, well, they have South Carolina at home, who's an improved team that has an experienced quarterback. Not many teams in the East have a Spencer Rattler that's had as many starts as he does, but it's in Athens. I don't know how Georgia wouldn't win that game. Auburn is in a rebuilding year, a transition year, in my opinion, with Hugh Freeze. I get that that's a rivalry game. I think you were in the end zone, by the way. That game's on September the 30th. This year, I don't know how Auburn is competitive in that game. Kentucky with a new quarterback at home. Florida still totally in transition mode. Ole Miss will be good at the skill positions. No way they line up in the trenches with Georgia. The Tennessee game, we saw Tennessee and their defense last year and how suspect they were. I realize that game's in Knoxville. It's the one that everyone is circling. If they played that game today, I would give Georgia a significant advantage. So, I mean, just looking at the schedule in total, I mean, I would set the over-under at 11.5 for wins for Georgia this year in the regular season, and I would take the over. I think the most competitive game they're going to have is in the SEC championship game or in the college football playoff. To me, Alabama and Ohio State are the teams that I'd be most concerned about for Georgia as they try to do something that no program's done in almost 90 years, and that's win 3 straight national championships. Minnesota's the last team to do it. To answer your question, they are absolutely prepared to win another national championship. They have depth and experience. They have leadership at just about every position. If Carson Beck performs the way that he performed in the spring game during the regular season, Georgia is going to have another chance to do that. I would look at Alabama before I would look at LSU in the West. They have question marks at quarterback, and that is going to be a big factor in determining whether Nick Saban's program can get back to the college football playoff. But their depth, to me, is significantly better than LSU's. I realize LSU beat them on the last play of the game, but I would take Alabama's program and their depth over LSU. If I'm looking at the next best team in the entire SEC, I would look at South Carolina and then maybe a Tennessee in Kentucky in the East, but I think they're behind Georgia. And then nationally, Ohio State and USC are the other teams to look at. But to me, the best program in college football going into the 2023 season is once again in Athens.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. It's all health. I mean, can Georgia just get out of their own way? Can they stay focused in summer? And can they stay, knock on wood, can they stay healthy? And I'm with you, man. It's the most balanced team. And they're not just balanced. They're really, really good on both sides heading into next season. All right, Taylor, man, appreciate you. Always great catching up. Always great insight. You and Stinch do a great job covering the SEC football every single week. And we'll have to get you on another show here in the fall, man. Appreciate you.
You got it, my friend. And golf on me, guaranteed.
Still love me. All right, Players Lounge, we appreciate you jumping in. We will have more this week and next week as we continue to get ready for a fun 2023 season. See you later.